All right, we are here. I am here with Gustavs, and we are here to talk about Overkill. I don't know why he wants to talk about this at all. He hit me with it this morning and said, "Hey, let's have a conversation about Overkill," and I'm like, "I don't even know what you're talking about. That sounds good." So, as always, Gustavs, you're in the driver's seat. So, why don't you tell us what the hell are we talking about?
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. Good to see you, and I'm looking forward to having an interesting conversation here. So, overkill. I was thinking about the way different sort of religious things work, and then sort of this concept of certainty of things. How in different kinds of in different religions you have people who are really looking for a kind of truth or a certainty of a kind, reliability, trust, things like that. And and I was just thinking, and I was looking at ways how people rely on kinds of rituals to get that certainty, or like different procedures, and then that kind of expanded outwards into just sort of ritualized human behavior where things don't make sense from a materialistic point of view, uh where yeah, things don't make sense purely from like a quantitative thing, and how people tend to use procedures that go way overboard to get the result. And it looks like people use overkill, going way overboard with something,
Mhm.
as a way of gaining certainty about something, a way of gaining trust. And then that trust can sort of expand out and allow for new things to happen. So, just as a quick example, uh, when people get sick, they are given antibiotics, and we are given way too much antibiotics
Mm.
for like a purely, the amount to kill the bacteria. Probably one dose is enough, maybe two, right? That's it. That's enough. But no, you need to take them for weeks, like days, weeks, whatever. But it's for a long, long, long time. And the point of that isn't just to kill them, it's to kill the babies and to kill the babies' babies and the babies' babies' babies. And it's very inefficient, actually. Like, we could be saving
Mhm.
a lot of money on antibiotics, but we don't. And there's a reason for that. And uh I hope you're following, but sort of just exploring that concept of how there's this inefficiency from a materialistic point of view that is extremely important for people anyway, and the things that it allows, and yeah, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're covering like three different aspects here. So the first thing I want to say is, in our age of gnosis, our individualistic age, one of the problems we run into is we think we can judge what overkill is and is not. Like, right? Because is it overkill or is it required? Those are good questions. And I think part of the problem is that when people see an extreme outlier event, they think, oh, that's overkill. Um, and I think one of the problems is that you need to understand overkill in terms of signals,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes overkill is an appropriate signal. So the thing I
Mm-hmm.
was, the thing that got brought up at lunch was Sarah was like, what's overkill?" Like, she has no idea. Like, what the hell's overkill? What is that? What is that word? And I was like, well, that's Rome beating Carthage and salting the earth.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can say that back then, Rome winning the war and salting, not just razing the city to the ground, although that's pretty hardcore already, but also salting the earth after they raise it to the ground is overkill. Um, but apparently not, because we still know about it and it's symbolic of something important, right? And so it it wasn't overkill, right? Or to the extent that it was overkill, it was a useful signal that we still
Mm-hmm.
use now, right?
Yep.
So that's one of the things you were talking about. Uh, so there's sorry, that's two of the things you're talking about. There's the idea that do we really know what overkill is? Because we can't really tell. There's the idea that, sometimes something that may well be quote overkill or overkill in the moment might be required. Like it might end up being the right answer, even though we're using the term over to describe it, right? It's over the normal, right? It's over what expectations maybe. But that doesn't mean that it's bad in and of itself. It might be appropriate. And that's where people get screwed up because to your third point, they want certainty. And so a negative kind of overkill manifests when people are trying to use material for certainty. Because what happens is they're like, oh, well, if going to church on Sundays is good, then going to church every day is 6 times better. Right? It's that sort of logic. And it's a very basic it's an incorrect logic, but it's often wrong, which is a different correct logic that can give you the wrong answers. That happens all the time. Just listen to James Lindsay. That's his whole shtick. Right? Or Brett Weinstein, any of these guys. They're all doing the same thing. Lots of logic, reason, rationality, totally bad conclusions because logic, reason, rationality don't vet your starting point. Right? And so when you're materialists, they're all materialists too, you go way overboard, you get overkill on these talking about ideas and talking about more ideas, talking about more ideas,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's the overkill of conversation right now. There's too many people who are having conversations and not enough people are out actually implementing the propositions from the conversations, right? So there's nothing wrong with propositions unless you don't act on them. And oh, by the way, you don't need propositions to act, right? This is an asymmetry there. Action is far more powerful than propositions, right? But if it's something you can't act on, maybe you're not the president and you can't stop bombings in Iran. Why are you thinking about it and talking about it? Because at the end of the day, you're wasting time that could be spent on something else. And if you don't sort of understand that, come to my Discord server. I'll give you plenty of better things to do than talking about bombing Iran or whatever other foreign country you're not near. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's overkill. So we're in the land of overkill of propositions. The propositional tyranny is an overkill in propositions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the
Well,
academic priests want power, and they're not going to get it, and they shouldn't have it because they're dumb. So
yeah, there's a bunch of interesting sort of aspects of it that I kind of figured out or I saw. So one of them is that you go overkill on something to show people that you're serious about it.
yep, yep,
So
that's right.
so for
That's right.
example, if you want to prove that if your job is important to you and you want to prove that, you will stay longer even though your job won't become more important to you because of that. You'll just stay longer so that people have no doubt that it's important to you. They have no doubt that you're a valuable asset and that you care
Mm-hmm.
because you want to put in 110% basically. Because otherwise, there may be doubt about whether you care that much. But if you do that extra 10%, there can be no doubt that you care.
Right.
And so overkill can be this mechanism of proving yourself, of displaying integrity in a way that
Mm-hmm.
can make you stand out, and
Right.
and it makes other people reliant on you in a way. It makes them trust you. It makes them trust your connection to that thing, right?
Right.
And so like another example of this is, for example, how priests in the Catholic Church have to be celibate.
Mm-hmm.
That's like
Yep.
you're making this huge sacrifice that's, strictly speaking, in some ways maybe not absolutely necessary for the job,
Yep.
right? Because other, there's people that don't hold to that, and they also have churches, and it kind of works. It's a trade-off, but it's a big sacrifice. And so if you make that sacrifice, nobody can really doubt that you mean it, that you take it seriously, that you're not just
Right.
there to play around and you know uh
Yep. Yeah, yeah, the signal of overkill is very important because it does, it says what you value, right? Which is yesterday's live stream topic. Like, how do you know what somebody values? Look at what they go overboard on. That's what they
mhm,
value, right? And so, like, if you have kids and you buy them too many toys, right? You value those children a little too materialistically, and you go overboard on Christmas or whatever. And yeah, that's not a great thing, but it at least tells you where they're oriented. They're oriented overly muchly to the kids, right? And to the material aspect of making the kids happy or something more specific. But yeah, overkill tells you a lot about what people value and therefore what they're going to do and how they're going to act in the future.
yeah, and that opens up, at least for me, uh a way of showing myself in community, of exemplifying something better, is to be intentional about stuff. Because I'm very prone to materialistic thinking, and so if I take this into account, like I won't mind actually doing 150%, even though I know it's unnecessary and it'll take my energy, and I could be doing other stuff. I could be out having fun and just sleeping or something. Like, that would be nice. But
Right.
if it matters to me that I get something done, and that other people notice it, and that other people can rely on it, people who maybe aren't that confident in whatever they're doing, right? So if
Right.
if people aren't confident in the company that I work at, that the company has potential and can succeed, but they respect me as a person, and I'm going overboard at the company, and I see potential in it, and I signal that, then they can rely on that, and the company will prosper as a result.
Exactly. Right. Right. Because we're all, it's not that we're all connected necessarily, but we're all able to see the people around us, and therefore there are signals there, and that's not optional, right? Like it, the fact that you can't answer a question like, you know, are what do you mean by God, right? Sends a signal if you do it publicly. If you do it privately, it only sends a signal to the people around you. But if you do it publicly, it's sending a public signal, and that signal actually matters, and the consistency of that signal, the depth of that signal, right, and the severity of that signal all make a difference into how people react to it. Now, that doesn't guarantee a certain type of reaction, but it does convey something about the signal and how important it is to you, right? And what it means to you, how it's been integrated into your life. And that signal points to something, right? And that, again, that goes back to last night's live stream. Um, it gives you some idea of their values.
Exactly, and that's very important for community building, for people to rely on those values and to build a to communally do stuff. And communities, it's communities do have to be hierarchies, I think, in some way, right? And so
Right.
sometimes if you see potential for a community, you've got to take on the mantle of the hierarch, and that means embodying it to the highest degree that you can, and that means putting in more than everyone else, and that's a big sacrifice, but that's what needs to happen for it to happen. And if and communities don't work if people don't have faith in it, and you need to
Yeah.
you need to give them a solid foundation for that faith, and you do that by going overboard.
Yeah. I think the thing that people are missing, particularly Jordan Peterson, unfortunately, um, is that when you're interacting with groups, there are always hierarchies. Like, once you abstract away from individual, which doesn't exist, right? So once you start talking about single part, which you've divided from a whole already, you already did that. You don't know that you did. That's what you did. You look in the world, you're seeing like tree branches. Well, guess what? Those tree branches were cut. That's why I see them. Because if you see a tree branch that's not cut, you think tree. That's right. And so tree branch is always a dissection, right? And then you go, aha, let's go. This is the emergence is good sneakiness. Let's go from the branch and figure out what we can figure out about the tree. Yeah, nothing, because the branch is a subclass of tree, and it's too late. You've already hurt the tree, right? And so we don't realize hierarchy is just the statement that there's more than one thing around. Pretty much it. And then that thing has a position relative to you. So in a community, it's I got to push back a little bit on what you said. So in a community,
Mhm.
um, you need to figure out where you fit in the body to enhance the body. The signal that you need to do that is overkill. Usually, the overkill person in the community becomes or is the leader. Not always, though. That's not a hard and fast rule. Now, before anybody will say questions my thoughts on community, I wrote the book on community. So there we go. All right, it's got my name on it and everything. No, I had to shield the book. We'll get the Shopify store with the book soon. It's probably going to take another week though. So, and they'll only be up for pre-orders because we got to figure out how many more we have to get printed. So yeah, the overkill is that signal that tells you who's leading in some cases, right? It's that signal that well, for you to follow, right? Even if you can't reach that, right? And when you have one person, sort of doing that overkill work, the other people get better. Like I've just seen this so many times in business. It's insane. And so they're required, right? Because we'll say just the what do I want to say? The dream version, utopic version of your company and why it's going to be successful and how that's wonderful is not sufficient to hold the company together. You need individuals to signal this is so serious that this dream, this vision of this company, that I am going to put in more work than we'll say most people would find reasonable. And that's going to be perceived as overkill. And that's a good thing in that case, right? And it's a bad thing if you're going to church 6 times a day, 7 days a week. So you got to kind of figure out where it fits and where it
No,
doesn't.
they
It's
are
just
people who do that. They're called
I
monks.
know. Oh no, I wasn't pulling that example.
Oh, yeah.
Little hint for the audience. The number of times I use an example that's not actually something I've observed is vanishingly small. But good luck with that. I'll say things like hypothetical, and I'm really just being a jerk because it's almost never hypothetical. Sometimes it is, but almost never. Sorry.
Well, but yeah, so it's this mechanism of uh like just the way the world works, of how we send signals to each other of, without words, because words don't seem to be enough. And even with words, when you're speaking with people, sometimes you need to be overkill with your words to get the signal across. You need to shout at them. You need to use
What are you
difficult
talking
language.
about? Why are you making this ridiculous statement, Gustavs? What is your point?
Exactly.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
need to be able to have loud signals, right? And the problem is because we don't know the difference between, we'll say, loud signals and lots of signals, right? Because those are hard to discern for some people. For me, it takes about 2 seconds. But whatever, that's just me. We don't know. We think like, oh my goodness, everyone's wearing masks. Yeah, everyone's wearing masks in the city, and no one's wearing masks outside of the city. Or they're still doing masks in New England. I'm like, you guys are not okay. You're all mentally ill, right? And they are, because the masks. Well, they were having people wear masks in outdoor parking garages. I was like, what? You're in an outdoor parking garage. There's no walls. It's like, what? What? There's wind whipping through. It's New England. Like, what are you doing? Right? And yeah, it was just completely overkill. And then people didn't know because they had loud signals, like the loudest people, most obnoxious people in the world. where we're just signaling these things over and over and
Yep.
over again as loud as they could, and people couldn't tell. Yeah, there's 4 people that believe this. 4, and maybe you should ignore them because everybody else does not believe this, but you can't tell, right? Because the overkill on the loudness of the signal, which is not the same as the overkill on the chorus of the signal, where there's lots of people saying the same thing.
Yeah. 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 And so I was thinking about what the strongest signals are, and I came to the conclusion that the strongest signal is martyrdom, like actually being killed for
Mhm.
your faith, and how that plays out, how it has consequences and so on. But nowadays we have a lot of people who are into martyrdom for a bunch of nonsense,
Yep.
for a bunch of silly stuff,
Yep.
and how to deal with that, because that's a pretty it's a strong signal, like do what I want or I'll kill myself. That's a strong signal. I hear that signal, it registers. So how to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean that formulation. I just say, okay, bro, life has consequences. Have fun. Like I don't. I'm very big on consequences, though. I think the one thing I figured out recently is like a lot of people like care if someone's wrong because they want to save them or whatever. And I'm like, hey man, you do you. If you want to do something that has consequences and those consequences manifest, I'm just going to assume you wanted those consequences, right? And like I try to warn people, and once I've warned them, my conscience is clear. Like, I'm like, okay, I guess they really want to do that. It's like that's fine by me. Like it's not my job to it's not my job to do more than notify them, right? Unless they engage, right? But if they don't engage, then my work here is done, and I can walk away with a clean conscience. I do that all the time. Well, I don't watch anymore. I used to sit by the cliffside and watch them break on the rocks. And now I've decided I don't have to do that. I should tell them, hey man, don't go near the cliff. You'll fall over and break on the rocks, and then walk away. That's it. And this is what I do now. I'm like, I'll see ya. I'm just letting you know you don't want to do that, right? But the problem we have now is the individualist frame, and so people are like, "Well, I want my video game reality, and if you don't give it to me, I'm going to kill myself." And I'm kind of like, "Well, you know what? I think if you were gone and not like adding to the voices of people playing video games and simultaneously saying they're a good thing for society, that might be better. I think this problem's going to work itself out somehow. I'm good." So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my attitude towards it. Like, well,
Yeah, and it's a little bit contradictory maybe, because strong signals are how we enter into like a shared reality, right?
I mean, we're in a shared reality and then we see the signal. The real question is what signals do we cooperate with and which ones do we decide not or participate with? And which ones do we decide are noise or are bad? Right? Because you notice there's 2 things there. Noise is neutral, bad is bad, right? And then right? Because what you want to do is filter for the good signals.
Mm.
Right? And that's what you wanna do. You wanna say, "Alright, well, this is a good signal." Now, either it's a good signal because there's a chorus behind it, or it's a good signal because it's loud and correct, right? Or it's a good signal because it follows, we'll say, the golden thread of goodness or something. I think Peterson would use the word logos there and not understand it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, signals interact with other signals. And with not just with signals, right? Signals also interact with actions because some actions, such as martyrdom, create signals, obviously. And so there's some kind of relationship there. And then if somebody goes to work every day, in the mine for 25 years, right, and does their does their duty, does what they need to do, right? That's a signal. And then if somebody, if that person dies, and then somebody comes along later and says something like, "Yeah, people who work hard their whole lives, deserve a pension, right? That's kind of a correct signal, right? Like, yeah, that makes sense, right? So you have those sorts of signals out there, and then when they correspond to the things that you've experienced, we'll say, that's one way to know that they're good signals. And so with
Mm-hmm.
overkill, the question is, who's the audience? What are you hoping to accomplish?
Mm,
And what is the thing? Right? Because a lot of these people, it's easy to tell that they're nutters because effectively what they want is someone else's participation. And that's something they're
mm-hmm.
just not entitled to. Like
Mm-hmm.
no one is entitled to come on my live streams and talk to me. No one is entitled to the product of somebody else's work. No one is entitled to property because it exists. Like no one's entitled to these things, right? And so when
Mm-hmm.
your martyrdom, whatever you're martyring, let's say it's not actually your life, although to your point, there's a lot of that going on. When your martyrdom doesn't serve a purpose. So, for example, you could make the argument that uh, shooting a healthcare CEO and going to prison is A, overkill, right?
Yep.
B, completely foreseeable. C, totally inevitable. You can assign all the moral valence you want, but that was going to happen. And that's your fault, effectively, for not making sure it didn't happen by solving the problem before it got so bad that someone was willing to go to prison to make a point,
Yeah.
right?
Well, also, it's totally overkill from the materialist perspective.
Yeah,
Because from the materialist perspective, it would have been sufficient to walk up to the guy, show him the gun, and tell him to like change the policies. And from the materialist perspective, that might, in their mind, it might even be better that way
right,
because like more efficient. The consequences would be more positive because the guy's alive. He can still, like the CEO is alive. He can make more effective
right,
changes towards like this better
right.
whatever policy. Blah blah. I don't know.
Right, right. Except A, that would never work, and B, um, that isn't a strong enough signal, and it's only a signal that no one hears. The reason why you shoot the guy is because then everybody hears the signal.
Yep.
And you've heard Peterson talk about this. Well, if you've heard Peterson, Maps of Meaning, for example, if you've heard his lecture series, you've heard him talk about this. Like serial, sorry, yeah, serial killers, but really any murderer should not get any press attention because that's actually part of what they're seeking, right? They're seeking to make a loud enough noise that everybody pays attention. So they're overkill. Because most serial killers, I don't know how familiar you are with serial killers. Most serial killers kill hookers, and this is the way it is. And so they're sending a strong moral message using a very loud signal, right? And usually that's personal for them, which makes it worse because they're hard to find because they actually hide the bodies. And I live somewhere and they found bodies from a serial killer. It was in my city too. It was just way on the outskirts. Yeah, and they kept finding bodies, and yeah, I was like but that signal is there, and the problem is, well, you kind of ignored the bad things that were going on in healthcare, and now someone had to come along and do something loud enough and clear enough and public enough that everybody started paying attention again, right? And that's really what it's all about. So you have these signals. Which ones do you pay attention to? Well, you should pay attention to ones that can kill you. So if people are getting killed, you need to pay attention to that signal for sure, right?
Yep.
Is it
Yep.
brown recluse spiders? Is it, rattlesnakes that just moved into the area? Right? Like these are things that again, I don't really use hypotheticals. Is it rabid dogs? Like what
Mm-hmm.
happened, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
is it a fireball in the sky? I don't know if you heard about the fireball in the sky. But yeah, I actually saw that. So I'm like, what? Like the weirdest possible set of circumstances conspired, which were also weird in and of themselves to make sure I saw that fireball. And I'm just like, well, I don't know what's going on. Although I heard a buffalo just fried itself at Yellowstone, boiled itself alive. And so I'm sure the Native Americans are now also flipping out at the symbolism. I don't know what it means because I feel like I should. I might have the books here somewhere in the shed, but like there's all kinds of symbolism on that, I'm sure, right? And so there's a lot of freaking out to be done because a meteorite so bright that you see it actually in the middle of the day. That's that's overkill, man. That's an overkill signal of
Yep.
something, right?
Yep.
And so, like, these signals are important. We have to pay attention to them. And overkill is a way of gathering attention and forming a group because it's signals that form the group, right? Because you have to see the signals and interpret them closely enough together to rally around the signal. And like you see, Sally's got it. The buffalo might have been saving us all, or we're doomed. Not sure. Like that's not a good signal because we don't know. Do we rally around the doomedness of the buffalo or the savedness of the buffalo? I have no idea. Right. And so that's the problem with we'll say pure signals, but signals aren't pure. They exist within a context and a frame. And then
Yep.
you are still interpreting. You're always interpreting because you're not the thing. So you have to interpret. That's what interpretation actually means. And then, how do you deal with that? So I think we've made a significant amount of progress in sort of sussing out overkill and signals and how this all ties together. So where do you want to sort of take it from here? What do you want to focus on, or do you want to like push back, or what do you want to do?
No, there's another aspect that I wanted to highlight, which is that you need very severe actions to create boundaries between things. So
Mm.
uh the world
Mhm.
where you have some kind of disease in your country, so an animal disease, let's say swine flu, right? You have some swine flu in your country in like the what do you call them? The farms where they grew the animals, and you actually want to like kill basically all the swine so that there's zero swine flu in the entire country. And then,
Right,
the next country like bordering us, like I don't know, Belarus, Russia, we tend to get it from there somewhere. Don't know. It's out there somewhere, but it's not in our place. And we go overboard to make that happen. Like we
right,
kill way, way too many, and then we don't, they don't get eaten or something. They get basically like incinerated, right?
right,
That's that's way overboard. And this principle happens in a lot of places where you kind of create purity through extreme action, and then you can
right.
put up a boundary, a
Yep.
boundary, and then that means that you can operate in these sort of qualitative categories. You can say we have no swine flu, they have swine flu. I don't know how much, but they have some, but we have zero. And then that really relieves like cognitive load and all kinds of loads that we have. It's much easier to operate in this world, which is discrete and kind of qualitative. And that's really
Mm.
important. We need that.
Yeah. No, I agree. So another way to look at that is overkill is a very bright signal and it provides an
Hmm.
extreme amount of contrast. And you're right. The purpose of it generally is to either draw attention to something that's been neglected, right? Or it is to set a boundary so that you can reduce your cognitive load. Like, so war is always overkill. That's pretty easy, right? Because you're killing large amounts of innocents with trained professionals effectively. If, by the way, if innocent people aren't dying at the hands of trained professionals, whatever you're talking about is not war. And please don't use that word. You're starting to piss me off. I'm gonna have to do something about this. So yeah, let's not go there. Every conflict is not a war. But the war by definition sets the boundary. That's what war does, and war is overkill, right? And but it sets the boundaries so that no, you're not doing this anymore. Maybe and people don't realize this. There's lots of wars where no country boundaries change, but trade policy changes, or attitude changes, or a behavior that you didn't know was going on before changes. And because we don't see it and we're flat worlders, we just think war means, boundary or resource contention or something. Absolutely 1000% completely false. Most wars are not over boundaries at all. Boundaries may be the excuse. So, like, you can look at the war in Ukraine. I mean, Russia's already said, if NATO is going to be on our border, then we're not going to be happy. We don't mind as long as there are independent countries between us and NATO. I'm sorry, by the way, ridiculously reasonable position, like probably the most reasonable position in the world right now of any country is Russia's position. And they're like, if instead of that, you're going to make NATO on our border, we are going to have to go to war. Completely reasonable. Thoroughly read. This is exactly the right answer here, guys. I don't know what to tell you. And so they're not opposed to having a country of Ukraine. They're opposed to having a country of Ukraine that allies itself, with NATO or with the West in general, not the NATO treaty in particular, but like Western virtues and values. Like they want a bulwark against the Western, a permeable bulwark, right? So they want, like, no, we want to decide what comes in and out of what we're calling Russia. Okay. All the border countries can be little experimental zones. That's fine. And then we get to decide ultimately what makes it in from those border countries. I mean, this sounds like utopia to me. You're not going to get any closer to perfection than that model. And so that's what they want. And I'm like, wait, it sounds good. Like they should do that. Go Russia. Sorry. I always been like, Putin has done nothing wrong. Sorry. This is a reasonable position. It's a good position, not only for Russia, it's a good position for the world because we don't want to homogenize the world, right? It's also the anti-globalist position. And I hate the globalists. I would burn them all alive if I just give me a match and get me close enough, right? So, I don't understand. Like you hate the globalists and you hate Putin? I don't know. Putin's fighting the globalists. I'm kind of like, it's like enemy of my enemy, right? Like, let's do this. So yeah, I mean, it's and the other side of that overkill, which you mentioned earlier, is people trying to flatten the world with overkill. I'm trying to say, like, no, you all must conform to this. That's obviously overkill as well. And I think in the United States, we never have that problem because there's so many cultures here. See, American Nations by Colin Woodard, right? There's so many cultures in the U.S. and they all basically leave each other alone. And all of our recent problems, we'll say the past, probably since the beginning of the Great War or the middle of the Great War, maybe, or not the middle. Sorry, the middle of the first half of the Great War, the federal government in the United States has too much power. And now there's all these conflicts with the federal government that never existed before. And you can just, like, in my lifetime, I've watched the conflicts with the federal government ramp up. Before, we just had way fewer conflicts with the federal government. And now we have more conflicts with the federal government. And I think that's that's important. RJ claims that Thomas Sowell has some good books related to this. Yeah, well, maybe he does. I love the guy. All his quotes are great. Never read his books. Burn all the books, including mine. So you buy a copy, you burn it, and you buy another copy, and just repeat for a while, right? I need the money. So it's a new marketing strategy Sally and I came up with. It's brilliant. What could possibly go wrong? I think that's sort of important to recognize. Again, I don't want to say there's like a dual aspect or a dual nature because there's a dual nature to everything. So it's kind of uninteresting. But you do need to use your discernment with overkill, right? And you also need to know if someone's doing it on purpose or because they're stupid, because that happens all the time. And RJ has confirmed that this is the best book selling strategy of all time. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and it kind of highlights that we do need to have, like, we should have boundaries, and those boundaries should be enforced, even if only for the, the symbolic, not symbolic, for the recognition that there is a boundary, and also so that we remember why those boundaries are there. so that we don't forget them, and so we can all agree on them. So I was looking at some old ancient Roman stuff, and they had this one god, although I don't think they called them gods. They were like one of these minor deities, spirits, whatever. It was the god of boundaries. I think he was called Terminus, and they
Mm.
had this
Mhm.
ritual around him where they would set up boundary stones somewhere, and then they would make sacrifices on those stones communally. So landowners from both sides would meet
Mm.
at the boundary stone every year and then make a sacrifice there.
Oh,
And
that makes
so
sense.
you always remember the boundary. It's mutually agreed on, and it's what do you call it? Not blasphemy, but it's really bad if you decide to move the stone. Like, you will be cursed for eternity, and your family will be cursed, and all this sort of stuff. Um, is my video lagging? It's kind of lagging, I think.
Yeah, you were paused and laggy. That's okay. We
Oh,
could hear you.
sorry.
RJ confirms it was called terminus. Yeah, I mean I think that's yeah, terminus is an end point. It's boundary point. We
Hmm.
use it incorrectly because we're dumb. Well, actually, also in space, a point can be considered a boundary because of the vastness of the three-dimensional nothingness. But that's a longer conversation that doesn't help anybody with anything, but it's fun to have. Maybe I'll have a
Hmm.
conversation on that someday. So yeah, I mean, this idea of these boundaries, and is it overkill, right? Or is it that in order to solidify the boundaries, we'll say in the ethereal and material realm, you must go through this ritual where a sacrifice is made at the line of the boundary to solidify the link between its spiritual and material validity, right? And so I think that uh, is important. RJ, fundamentalism is also overkill. Well, yeah, I would just call it scientism, mainly because A, that's way more accurate, and B, it pisses the scientists off, but kind of is meant to teach them an important lesson about the fact that what they're doing is no different than the people they hate. This is the exact same pattern, just done with different objects, we'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, I think it's really important that there's a link between uh, disrespect towards rituals and materialism, and it you can look at it through Overkill, because rituals are always something that is, from a materialistic point of view, excessive and unnecessary, because you're
Right,
putting time and energy and money into celebrations and into waving your hands around and going into places and meeting people and communicating to them, sending letters, receiving letters, reading things, talking to people in uh,
yeah,
formal ways, which are, maybe it's just good manners, but from a materialistic
right,
point of view, actually your relationship to everyone else and everything else is self-evident and uh, objective, and you don't need to actually talk to people,
right.
really,
I mean, I'll
in a
have
way.
to minorly correct you. It's time, energy, and attention, not time, energy, and money. Uh, so money is representative
Okay.
of attention over time, but whatever. Yeah, it's
Okay,
time.
okay, okay, okay.
So yeah, from the materialist perspective, that is the battle because they don't see a use for things like ritual. They don't have language or conceptual framework for understanding things like tradition. Um, the closest they come is evolutionary lineage or some equally goofy, ridiculous thing. And so the problem that winds up happening in that situation is that they are uh, unable to bind the world together. Now, to be fair,
Mhm.
science is about breaking the world apart into pieces. Like that's their job. Dissection is what they do. And when they're doing it well, and when they're doing it within a binding or wholeness framework, mwah, right? And I seriously think, I think seriously, it's possible the low hanging fruit's been got with science, and it's kind of at an end to a very large degree, which is why we have the replication crisis, for example, right? We just have too many people trying to find new things, and no matter how many people you have finding new things, you've run out of new things. That's quite possible. The world is finite, which they keep telling us, and then they keep acting like, no, 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 there's a new particle theory just on the horizon. Sabine Hassenfelder talks about this all the time. She's not wrong.
Also, with replication is also inefficient and unnecessary from a meteorologist point of view. Once you've proved something, once you've shown it, that's sufficient. Why would you do it again? You don't need to. You've shown
Yeah.
it.
Right.
It's published. It's science. Just trust it.
Right. Well, because science is dissection, the first thing it dissects is time and stabilizes it, and then pretends like nothing ever changes. Right. And then turns time into entropy effectively. Right. So time is now a mathematical concept called entropy, and we can measure it. And it's like, well, no, you can't. Ansema wants to know what fundamentalism is in your use of the term. Let me go first. I just want to say fundamentalism is the propositional tyranny. They're actually the same. Or fundamentalism is the result of the propositional tyranny. Fundamentalists use the word and the word alone to make legalistic or contractual style claims about how things should be. That's scientists do that. Protestants do that. And those are the only two groups that do that. Here you go. What do you think, Gustavs? What's your definition of fundamentalism?
I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's pretty much the same thing. Is that you have you have some axioms that are just propositional. It's not like anything much higher than some propositional axiom, which is the propositionalism, I guess. That's how I see it.
It's that reliance and overemphasis on words that like you can tell me all day long that I should be nice, and if I punch you in the face, I don't know what good that did you. I really don't. I don't know why you're yapping your mouth. And the odds that I'll punch you in the face go way up when you start talking. Just saying. Like me, right? Well, I'm just saying, like, from a technical standpoint, the odds go up. That's all I'm saying, right? That's fundamentalism right there. So RJ claims that sexualized rituals are now a thing in Eastern Europe, most popular in the Eastern Bloc. Well, Gustavs, I'm going to count you as somewhat of an expert on this, as opposed to RJ, who's in DC.
I have no idea what RJ is talking about. Actually, I don't know what secularized.
That's what I suspected. Yeah, RJ, can you add a little bit of flavor to that so that we can?
Okay. Yeah, it seems like RJ knows something about it. I would like to know what he means.
Me too. All right, Anselman. Catholic doctrine affirms scriptural infallibility as an authority as much as Protestants. No, not at all, actually. No, because Protestants have one tool. One. And that's all they ever use. So no, it's like Catholics say scriptural infallibility exists, but they don't rely on interpretation. That's why they used to do it in Latin, which is the correct answer, Catholics. Go back to that, please, and make sure none of your parishioners ever learn a line of Latin. You'll be doing them a disservice. And so it's not as much as Protestants. Nothing is more important to Protestants than the word. Nothing, or actually, than the propositions in the book in the specific interpretation of the book that they happen to have, right? which is the fundamental problem, right? So yeah, I mean that's the yeah. Of course, it gets used lazily, Ansem, and it gets used lazily because it's everywhere, and that's the problem. It's everywhere. Fundamentalism is it's the propositional tyranny that John Vervaeke talks about, right? The better term for this is still the age of gnosis, right? Where all knowledge is propositions, and that is the highest value. right? And that comes straight from the Reformation. It doesn't come from the Enlightenment or any of this other garbage. Those are lies. It's the Reformation that causes this problem.
Yeah, I think RJ posted a link that actually never got posted. But like the
Oh yeah, he'd have to
replication.
send me the link in Discord, and then I can post it for him. But he knows how to do that.
Oh, okay. So he's saying, so to qualify per your
Or
question,
maybe I can make him a mod.
academics and therapists have been arguing for and doing secular ritual, acknowledging the importance of ritual as recognition of something important. Well, that makes sense, like that, but that is how things are working, and that showed itself very clearly in the incident a couple of years back, in the fake incident, and that's how just stuff happens. Yeah, you have these big things. So, for example, on the topic of World War II, we had in Riga a very big monument that was set up by the Russians to commemorate the liberation of Riga at the end of the Second World War. Right? We don't consider it liberation because it was accompanied with a bunch of uh, what do you put, deportations and mass killings and repressions and so on, and ethnic cleansing. So we don't like it very much, and it got taken down, but it didn't get taken down. Like, first of all, why do you have to even take down a monument? Second of all, why do you have to set up a monument? Third
Right.
of all, why do you have to take it down in a very theatrical and impressive way, where they topple it over and it falls into this big lake or pond, and the water goes up in a big splash, and then afterwards it gets turned into like some skate park or something. Like, and no, actually, it didn't just get turned into a skate park. There were like long discussions about what to do with the space afterwards. Like, these things
Right.
matter. These rituals and signals,
Yes.
monuments. Monument has to do with it comes from Latin to warn someone. So it's like a embodiment of a warning of something. Like a me- like wait, no, it's not just warning. It's like an indication. Like you can uh, like pointing someone somewhere. Basically, it's a pointer. It's an embodied pointer to something. That's the thing I'm saying. Um, so that's an example of just how things happen. Uh, but yeah, like during the incident with the virus, a lot of stuff was very excessive and ritualized. And it's weird that the same scientific material people use deconstruction to deconstruct like religious stuff and just cultural rituals and celebrations and festivities and identities. It gets deconstructed. It's like, oh, there's actually no such thing as a Latvian, because I had a great great grandfather that was from Lithuania. Like that's
Right.
what I hear
Right.
a lot
They
in the news.
changed it. You changed the starting point. You changed the story.
But then at the same time, simultaneously, you have people saying, admittedly, that yeah, well, actually, not everyone does need to wear a mask, but if everyone wears a mask, then that sends a signal. Or yeah, you don't actually have to take too much antibiotics, but we need to have this rule that everyone follows because of less capable people.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of the rules are designed for imperfection, and people don't realize that. So somebody like me, if you tell me to take something every 3 hours, down to the minute, right? And I have OCD, so it will happen every 3 hours. I will wake up after 3 hours to take like I'm hardcore. None of the systems are designed for me. They're designed for somebody who isn't me, clearly, right? They're like, wait, like I would show up to doctors with like logbooks, and they'd be like, "What?" Or like summary pages, like, and they'd be like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm like, "Don't all your patients do this? They really should. They got to get you up to speed somehow. I don't want to sit there and have a long conversation about it because I'll miss stuff, right?" So I write it down when I think of it, and then right, and they don't. Yeah, people don't understand. We'll say the significance of that.
Yeah, and the thing I was just saying about academics in the Eastern Bloc and so on becoming more. I wouldn't say like discovering this. I would say just becoming self-aware about it because they're doing it anyway. Everyone's doing all these secular rituals,
Right.
but but we're just becoming more self-aware about it. And somewhere where I see this happening, well, I assume it's happening a lot, and I know it's happening, is in actual psyops that these entities are running on people through the news and
Yep.
so on. They're becoming self-aware about it, and then they're using these understandings of like propaganda, whatever that means, and
Right.
so on. Yeah.
Right. But that's the different problem. So that's the problem of the inevitability of religion,
Mm.
right? And then what's been happening is because we've reached the end of materialism, right? Because we've reached a place where the material um, no longer explains the world. Um, we are noticing that there's these other things going on because we've spent so many years, decades focusing on science, materialism, and individualism and objectivism. I have a video on that, by the way. We spent so many years focusing on those things. Now we're at the point where we're paying attention to not those things because they don't explain the things we most care about, and so now that's created a problem effectively.
Yeah.
And that that particular problem, I mean, that's a big problem. Effectively, it's a big, 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 big problem. And now people are kind of opening up, right? And so you've got on one side, you've got the Christians, especially the evangelicals, because they're all fundamentalist, crazy people, whether they realize it or not. And they're like, aha, the conversation finally opened up on the topic we know about, have language for, and care about. And now we can do our thing, right? And it's totally not working out for any of them, which just cracks me up because I'm like, yeah, you guys psyoped yourselves on that one. Um, and instead, what's happening is the conversation is moving more towards, well, what are these things? And it's like, yeah, but we have language to describe all of this stuff because it's really actually as old as we are or older. Jordan Peterson, right? Hierarchy is older than trees. Okay, well, we weren't around before trees, so that's older than us, right? And it's kind of like a good statement of reality. Something that was around before you were is also part of reality. Sure, that's great because it's necessarily, by definition, at that point, independent of you. And you'll hear guys like Verveke. Verveke's done this a number of times. He'll say, "Yeah, something that you care that you want to exist independent of you, right? You want it to live past your life or something." Very complicated, secular, scientific way of saying reality. He doesn't like that word because he wants it to remain undefined so that he can define it any way he wants. Which same as playing God, by the way. So you see these patterns. There's a pattern, right? You see these patterns kind of manifesting where everybody's sort of upset, in essence, about um, not being able to explain the most important, most interesting parts of the world, the parts that are actually moving the world. And then they're getting, we'll say, increasingly upset about this. Um, and that's really what we're struggling with. Like
Yeah.
those religious patterns, right? That's what we're struggling. We're struggling with the battle of the Gnostic, heretical, pagan cults.
Yeah. Well, the aspect that I don't know, the thing that I fixated on is how this deconstruction and this move towards like efficiency, which goes against any kind of like ritual or signal, I guess. It 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 tends to deconstruct some, but then these other ones just get set up, and those don't get deconstructed in that same way. Like the
Right.
even things like washing hands and so on, like sometimes may not be purely materially necessary, actually, sometimes.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Uh, or like using disinfectant or wearing a mask. Like I'm not saying you don't have to, even though I've read some stuff that makes me actually doubt it in general. But uh there's times when when it doesn't get deconstructed. So what do you think of that double standard?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you know, you're following a bunch of patterns. You're mimicking a bunch of signals. Um, you don't frame it that way um, because effectively you have been told that you're some non-existent thing like an individual living in a
Mm,
non-existent thing like an objective world, right? There's objective materiality. Um, you know, where only material matters. Okay. So now you're trapped being manipulated against your conscious will, because I would argue your will is not only conscious, um, because you're not paying attention to the things that are moving you.
mhm.
Because the things that are moving you are not material, right? There's a correlation between what moves you and material, but material is not the thing moving you. And I'm not, denying Aristotle's, material cause. Um, what I'm probably it's probably not the four causes. It's probably the four, uh, what would you call it? The four strands of reason or something,
Mhm.
right? Like, because
Mhm.
what
Yeah.
Aristotle's describing is the reasons, because there's always four reasons for anything that occurred, always four, right? That's really what he's saying. He's not.
Well,
They're not causes.
it's kind of like 4 frames to explain the origin of something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or four aspects that explain how how events actually manifest in the world. Four manifestations for every action. How's that? Right? Like that's the healthier way to think about Aristotle's quote four causes. On the other hand, make final cause great again. That's still a thing. So yeah, I mean I think that's one of the more, we'll say, important aspects, is that you kind of have to pay attention to the fact we have a banner for that and everything. Um, you have to pay attention to what's moving you, or you will not know what's moving you. And
Mhm.
now we're in the age, because the age of gnosis is breaking down effectively, um, or the myth of World War II is breaking down anyway. Um, what's happening is we're now paying attention to, well, how was the world working? Like we thought we knew how the world worked, and then we're just finding out we don't, because Trump got elected or because Biden got elected, right? Or maybe both, because that's a thing, right? Or we don't understand how, because Joe mentioned this in a recent in a Winston Marshall. That's the guy's. I was trying to remember Winston Marshall's name yesterday on my stream. So he had a talk with Winston Marshall, and he mentioned this. He said, "Well, one of the things about Trump is he just does stuff, and it, and then a bunch of things happen because he does stuff." It's like, yes, that is that is correct, right? So if you're trying to listen to him and figure out what he's going to do, then you psyoped yourself. You're a complete moron. So also, at the same time, if you listen to him, you'll be able to infer what he's going to do. But you have to understand that he's being completely honest with you, and then you're not used to that from a politician. So you're always trying to second and third guess, and it's all 4D chess. Not with Trump. He doesn't care about 4D chess, guys. He tells you exactly how things are going to go down. And if you watch him for 4 seconds, you can go back in the past and watch him, and then you will figure out when he says something exactly what he's going to do. Exactly. It's not that hard, right? But everyone's overthinking it because they all want to be big brain smart people for some stupid
Yeah.
reason, and that's the overkill of of quote modernity. Again, the better term is agenosis. Is the overkill is propositions, using propositions inappropriately to predict behavior, right? Like when I make the proposition, let me give you a hypothetical, not in all cases, but in like 90% of the cases, I'm not giving you a hypothetical at all. I'm actually flat out lying to you about the hypothetical. Why? Because I want to take some arrogant prick and shove it straight where the sun don't shine. That's why. That's actually why. And I derive a great deal of enjoyment from them never going to stop, by the way, ever. So sorry. Also, it should be a good signal, right? It's an overkill move for sure, but it should be a good signal that you shouldn't listen to this person on this issue because they're stupid. Like, they think I'm using a hypothetical and they don't recognize it. Like if you say something, this is a hypothetical, and it's something in the world, A, it's not a hypothetical, and B, you've screwed up because you didn't notice. Like you should know what, right? So you're admitting you don't know reality because that wasn't a hypothetical. You need to know the difference between a hypothetical and a real situation. And there is some nuance there, right? You can say, well, hypothetically, Gustavs and I could meet in at the Schiphol airport. Oh, okay, that's a true hypothetical, right? It's set in the future, may or may not have, right? It has a potential, right? But when I go, let me give you a hypothetical example, the odds that that's something I know a great deal about was either an event I experienced or an event that was close to me or an event that's well documented, they're pretty high. Really, really high. So you got to be really careful when you buy into a hypothetical that you're not going to like the answer to because I'm trying to prove a point to the audience, and I don't care whether you. I usually don't care when I'm talking to people what they think. I'm really playing to an audience here. I'm not. I know how signals work, even if you don't.
Yeah, and that's kind of, that goes along with the Trump stuff, and it's just a silver bullet to academic thinky talky types, because they don't cross the boundary into actual physical stuff.
They
And
can't. They live in the hypothetical. They don't live in the real. That's why they're the ones having the discussion of what is real. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Why would anybody need to discuss ever under any circumstances what is real? Like, this is not hard. Real is what you experience with other people. That's it. It's not that hard. Like, it's totally solvable. I just solved it. Solved the whole question. I did want to address this, RJ. Anyway, on Overkill, does it result in an compulsive tension swing back in the other direction? There is no other direction. That's flat world thinking. Like,
yeah,
there's
it's
no
binary thinking.
It's
And
binary
it's
thinking.
equality, because you're saying that if you make an action towards A, you'll get A and B, and it'll be equal or something like that.
Right. And that never happens in the real world. The real world is asymmetrical. And like even the physicists know this, right? There's a big question in physics, right? They're like, well, matter and antimatter, and assuming they're even correct about that. And I got my questions, right? Matter and antimatter cancel each other out and explode, right? So in Hegel's hypothetical world, matter or thesis and antithesis get together and form something bigger. That's not real. That's the opposite of all the evidence we've ever come across for this. So in physics, they've got it right. So the positive aspect, the negative aspect come together, and an explosion happens, and we all die. Sounds terrible. So the question is, well, why is there more matter in the universe than antimatter? And I'm like, it's just easy to read Genesis and believe. I don't understand why you're never going to resolve that anyway. Like, what do you do? What are you doing? But even they know the world's not symmetrical, which means it's not equal, which is fine because that doesn't. RJ, take Trump seriously, not precisely. Yeah, well, seriously, not metaphorically, right? You can take it metaphorically. You don't, and it's not so much about precision and accuracy, but they just Trump is the thing that betrays the age of gnosis most clearly. Because people just think like, oh my God, he's gonna build a 60-foot high wall, or like my favorite one still is when he's so good. He knew exactly what he was doing. There was a budget thing, and so they shut down the staff at the White House. And he was having the winning basketball team, into the White House. And the reporter's like, what are you gonna do? Your fancy staff with your fancy French fag food is not here. Like, what are they gonna eat? And Trump's like, first of all, he's like, they're basketball players, guys. Like, they eat at fast food restaurants. So he says, oh no, I have my staff go to Burger King. They're going to get enough burgers to reach from here to the moon. Right. And so like, I hear this and I'm instantly on the floor incapacitated for 5 minutes because I know because it's not because that's funny. It's because I know what he did. And I knew what the fallout was going to be the minute I saw it. I'm like, they're going to lose their minds. They're going to take this completely literally as though this is exactly what he thinks he's doing. And they're going to try to use that to make him look stupid. And because it's such an obvious, hysterically funny joke, it's going to completely backfire and make them all look like retarded morons. And sure enough, so like that's what made it funny to me. I'm like, this is like a joke on top of a joke on top of a joke. This is a brilliant example of the fractal nature of reality, the self-similar fractal nature of reality, right there. And so yeah, you don't want to take Trump literally. You want to take him metaphorically, or you don't want to take him actually. You want to take him metaphorically, right? Because his language is overkill. And so that kind of hopefully answers your question, RJ. That is one sign of overkill. Okay. I use overkill all the time, right? Usually I use it in the form of hyperbole, right? And I'm just, sometimes it's flat out extremism. I'm like, burn all the books. Obviously, I'm using overkill to highlight something instead of boundary and get you to pay attention to it all at once. All at once. And, all at the same time. And then, of course, Sally's brilliant observation was, yes, burn this book and then buy another copy. And that way we'd solve two problems at once. And that is, other signs of overkill are, raising Carthage and salting the earth so it never becomes a city ever again. Like that's another good example. But again, the problem is overkill is an interpretation, and if you think you can by yourself interpret overkill, you're insane, because a lot of arguments, especially on the internet, but a lot of arguments even in mainstream media and stuff, rely on you agreeing that something is overkill, right? Is it overkill to detain somebody on drugs by using your knee? That's a good question. Like, that's a reasonable question. Okay, that's a question. You're right. Is it overkill to stop somebody from walking down the middle of the road? I don't think that's I don't think, especially, and overkill is, like everything else, is contextually based. And so you don't have access to all the facts, and you're doing the judging on the overkill. And it's like, maybe it's not overkill. Like, maybe burning witches is the right answer. Maybe determining witches is hard and we did it poorly, but maybe burning them is actually the correct thing to do. I don't know.
The thing is, overkill is only really valid as a thing in the material concept, because it's material overkill, but in every other way, it's like it's sufficient, it's good or something. Because you get certainty, you get trust in something. You're sure that you're not sick because you had a doctor examine you, for example. And so maybe you didn't need to go to the doctor, but you did, and now you feel safe, and now everyone around you has to not worry about that at all. Or, for example, you had bed bugs, and then you burned the bed, and now you don't have to think about it anymore. And like, you cleanse the house with some toxic chemicals. And that was overkill, probably, because you could have just sprayed a couple spots where the bed bugs were hiding. But you didn't know that, and you couldn't have known that. And so you went into material overkill, but now the world is right again. It's safe. And that has to do a lot with with the symbolic stuff, with the language of creation, about how space is created. It's like, it's this thing of how, but you could have been nicer to those people, and you didn't need to, like, kill all of them and whatever, but you did, and now things are good, and actually you were told to do that, and it's good enough. And the world is more simple now, and it's simple enough that lots of people can exist in it, and you can have this boundary, this wall between things. That's a structural thing, and we need boundaries to have a world that we can actually live in.
To have anything.
Actually. Yeah.
To identify an object is to acknowledge it has boundaries. Now, if you're bad at that, you'll identify bad objects, but But that's a different problem. Discernment is always the key. But yeah, no, that was good. Like I think your ability to discern overkill in a materialist frame is so limited because, to your point, a lot of things are done for the spiritual, for the ethereal, for the other side of the register, so that there's a completion there. And that it may appear to be overkill, but it's really just being safe. And you may not be in a position to discern those things. And this is because we're living in the age of gnosis, because we're living with the propositional tyranny, because we're living in this weird soup, uh, especially with the individualism. We think that we can judge things that clearly we have zero access. Like I heard, this is great. There's a live stream out there. I'm not gonna get into it like on mine because I don't want to call attention to lunatics, but also it's sort of not relevant. But you can watch people like this. They'll say things like, "I think that institution is an institution they're not part of. Like they're not even a member of this institution, right? It's not a member. It's not something they were ever a member of. I think this institution handled this poorly. They should have done it in private." Okay, that statement can never be correct ever, right? Even if we'll say they're factually right, they didn't know that, right? Because you, by definition, don't know what happens in private unless you're the person, right? So I can say, for example, privately, Gustavs and I talked earlier about the title of this live stream, right? That happened, right? But I can't say, oh well, so and so was publicly admonished by their company when a private admonishment would have done, and I don't know why they didn't give so and so a private admonishment. How would I know that? I have no way to know that. So I've made a claim for which I cannot possibly have any evidence. And the number of times people get fooled by people making claims for which they cannot possibly have evidence just stuns me. Then again, if you watch, I know it's not out yet, but coming soon is this reaction video to the Brett Weinstein, James Lindsay thing. Now, there is a point in there where they start talking about evidence. And when you understand, and I break it all down for you, that's going to be part 2. It won't be in part 1. But I break it all down for you. There's a point at which I talk about evidence and standard of evidence. And given that people are so horrifically confused about what may or may not constitute evidence, and the fact that there's different types of evidence, it's no surprise to me that people aren't catching it when people make claims for which they could not possibly have the evidence. And those aren't valid claims. Even if you're correct, those aren't valid claims. A valid claim might be, well, I don't think, it looks to me like they didn't, privately admonish him or something like that. That would be a valid claim, but it's also a ridiculous claim. And then I think helpful RJ here. Can we differentiate overkill from straw manning when it comes to conversation and discussing? I would say yes, because any hyperbole, which I use copiously and with no remorse, is certainly overkill, but not straw manning. There's certainly an overkill to a straw man, and there are certainly uses for straw man. And by the way, just a little hint, these people who talk about straw men, boy, do they use a lot of straw men. I'm just saying. They call it reduction. Let's reduce what we're talking down to this essence. Oh, you're straw manning. Okay. Fair, I guess. Also, you're a scumbag. Different problem. What do you think? What do you think about this differentiation?
I think that I think straw manning. I think straw manning is a form of extreme theatrical polemics, like discussion, debate, and stuff. And you need that. That's also overkill. And it's like this boxing or wrestling match, that's just a way of hashing out some discussion in public that is very loud and flamboyant and uses straw men probably.
Yeah. Well, and it's straw man is a way of owning the frame.
Yeah.
right? Because to make a straw man, you have to make a bunch of declarations about a situation, right? And then the other person has to either agree or disagree to those. And often they miss it because they want to be in agreement all the time. Unlike me, who wants to catch you at your error and stop you immediately and interrupt you, because when you proceed from an error, you're going to get bad results anyway.
Yeah,
And I don't
exactly.
want you
That's
enchanting the audience.
the only way to stop a straw man from being effective is to shout over the other person. And
Exactly.
if
That's
you're
correct.
being a mild mannered academic guy, that's not going to happen, and you're going to get you know, put in the ground.
You're gonna get stuck in the 4-part Peterson Sam Harris debate from years ago. That's exactly what that was. It was just Sam Harris's continual making of straw man and Peterson taking it way too seriously. Instead of saying, that's a straw man. Why don't you add some IQ points to your point instead of being a jerk? Because that's what I would have said. Like, I mean, nicer than that in the beginning, but certainly by the end, I would have said, listen, dude, you gotta stop doing this shit because I'm gonna punch you out. So it's up to you. And maybe you can't, in which case you better leave because I'm punch out. You'd be surprised how effective that is. I've used it for decades. It totally works. Like, it's because these people are all weak and they know it. And it's like, okay, well, fair enough. But also, it is my way and there ain't no highway. So do what you want. Do what you want because I'm going to do what I need to. So, yeah. So, RJ, can overkill be self-measured by observing the degree of intensity of high scale scope of attention being too small? No, I mean, we sort of went over this in the beginning. Like a loud signal, we're not good at discerning loud signals from a chorus of similar signals, right? Because they have a loudness to them. They also have additional components to those signals. And so, in other words, when you hear a chorus, like, I mean this technically, right? When you hear a chorus sing, it's not the same as somebody singing that same thing very loudly, even if the volume, we'll say, is materially the same. And this is sort of what Gustavs is actually getting at, in some sense, is just because in material land, according to the god of measure, this is overkill, doesn't mean it's not necessary, required, and good. It just means that in that frame, it looks like something negative, but actually there's no compelling reason to think that. And I started in with the self-measured thing by saying you can't do that. Like you're already out over your skis there. There's no such thing as self-measuring. There's no such thing because you're judging overkill, and that means you're the judge. And maybe you suck at judging things because you do.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought of another thing that kind of resonates a little bit what you said with the chorus and this one signal and multiple, is that if you put a really excessive amount of time, energy, and attention into a single telos, into a single signal, it's going to take away resources from the other ones. And that'll
Exactly.
amplify it even more and contrast it even more. And if you're a person like me, you want to put an excessive amount of energy into something that's good, because otherwise you're going to get up to a bunch of nonsense with other stuff and get
Yeah.
distracted and read a bunch of books.
There you go.
In my
That's right.
case, yeah.
And then you could think books are your friends in Sally's case. And then that would destroy your life for several years or decades or perhaps the whole thing. Yeah. In the case of academics, so much wasted potential. Like imagine if they got outside. So yeah, the fundamental problem comes down to because overkill is actually in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, a binding. Either a binding of attention, right?
Yep.
Or a binding of the ethereal and the material, right? Or a a, a a way to bind your activity to your values,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's 3 ways in which it's a binding, right? So
Yep.
you're
Yep.
binding
Yep.
your activity to your values, right? So that makes it handy for last night's live stream topic, right? How to see how others are oriented, right?
Yep.
Oh, you look at overkill. And look, guys, just as a quick aside, I'm going to give Gustav some time to actually think about a response, so he doesn't feel pressured here. Like and subscribe, and look at all the other videos. And I know I'm a little behind on Rumble. We got to fix this Rumble situation here, but at least I got the live streams rolling. So I gotta put my back catalog in Rumble. But for now on YouTube on Navigating Patterns, we have plenty of great stuff along these lines. And if some of this, if I'm being a little short form with some of this, it's because I've talked about it in other videos, and possibly in other live streams, but hopefully in other videos. And we're gonna get the monologues. Although, look, man, sometimes there's real insight in the conversations after the monologues and the live stream. But we're gonna get the monologues eventually all published as videos. But the live streams are great. They can be a little long and meandering. I understand that, but also they're quite good. So I wanted everybody to just sort of think about that and consider that, because we're definitely trying to grow the channel and get the message out to more people, because people need to understand this stuff. And you're not going to get it to listening to the intellectual dark web or Peterson or any of these other clowns. Unfortunately, as much as they paved the way and set the stage and did all kinds of wonderful things, and that most of their stuff is actually not wrong, it also has its limits because it's limited by science. And so we're trying to break out of those limits and sort of elevate the conversation back into the ethereal. And I don't think that's overkill.
I don't think it's overkill either. I think it's effective. What's happening on this channel, and it's definitely been helpful. So that's some efficiency. But also, you do need overkill to get there. You do need to slap people in the face sometimes to get the signal
Yeah.
across.
Right. Yes, slapping people in the face, other people may consider that overkill, but actually it might be
Yeah.
the right, it might be a
Yep.
way to convey the right level of respect in a situation. And I say
And
this all the time, right? But I'll say it again. I've had several people 10 years after I backhanded them come up to me and said, "Thank you for that. I know I was pretty upset about it at the time, but actually I needed to know how annoying I was in the moment." Well, there you go. You're welcome.
yeah. And if people put stuff in the overkill frame, you know that it's the materialist frame. So that's a handy thing that you can kind of just use as a tool, as a heuristic, I guess.
Heuristic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good
And
heuristic. I like that.
yeah, and you do need to get physical sometimes to make things tangible. Because that's
By
kind of
definition.
going in this
Yeah.
in this hierarchy of things, from the highest as it kind of manifests down into these lower layers of things. If you have a gap between you and another person, it just means you kind of have to go down into a valley together to like meet at the bottom. And that means going down into more fundamental things. And if you're really far apart from each other, if you've really got a huge gap, then you will have to resort to really dirty stuff, right? And so
Right.
you can see this even in the warfare thing that you bring up from time to time in the Middle Ages. If you have two cities that are sort of next to each other, that they're both kind of civilized and Christian and so on, they can have a form of very ritualized and symbolic like, what is it called, single combat, like a duel, right? And
Right.
maybe that
Right.
duel doesn't even have to be to the death. Maybe it can be early until like first blood or third touch or whatever, and that
Right.
can be a way to
Right.
resolve conflicts. If you go further away and you're dealing with Mongols, well, then now you're gonna have, wait, no, not Mongols. So like an intermediary might be someone from France versus England, right? You're
Mm.
gonna have longbows, you're gonna have trebuchets and catapults and stuff, and you're gonna wreck each other. If you're dealing with Mongols, now you're dealing with people who deliberately disease you and who bring plague and who will just slaughter you. So you kind of have this scale of more symbolic, and then you have rougher stuff uh, to make things tangible, because otherwise people just don't get it. But if you have
Yep.
people who are in kind of the same frame as you, a lot of shared stuff, then it doesn't take much to make
Right.
make things tangible. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, that's really important. The we'll call it the physical manifestation or the tangibility of something relies on a material, an action in the material world. Right. And when you don't have that, you basically have a problem, because there's a mismatch in the signals of the material versus the signals of the ethereal. And really you want those to match. Right. In other words, you want words and actions to match. All right, which is, I mentioned that in
Yep.
last night's stream. Right. Because if you don't have that correspondence, then something's amiss. Like,
Yeah.
and maybe it's okay, right? Maybe this is an exceptional circumstance, but most of the time that's not the case.
That's a big problem. That's lack of integrity. And you really need your words to match your actions. That's really super important. People's like a man's word used to be worth a lot to him. You know, almost as much as their own life. And people don't have that anymore.
Right.
And sometimes to actually, you can say that integrity is important, but sometimes it's like you could make concessions that you could you could bend the edges and so on. But actually, if your word matters to you, and it should, although in our society maybe it shouldn't at the end of the day, like it's well, it
Well, it
should,
doesn't.
but
Well, no, it's this is the flood of literacy, right? See a previous live stream. All right. This is the flood of literacy. So you've given everybody access to words, everybody, and then
yeah,
devalues words. And then
yeah,
now everyone's using words. All of the number of made up words and terms between Brett Weinstein and James Lindsay, and I'm only halfway through the video, is off the chart. I swear, you can tell they're not talking about anything and they're never going to make any progress because they just keep making stuff up. You know, they'll just slap a word onto truth and be like
yeah.
a truth thing. And it's like, what are you talking? You can't do
Oh yeah, yeah.
that. This
So
is
so
the German
I think
language.
I think okay, so actually maybe you should push back on this if you think it's right. But in some way, uh my integrity with my word should matter to me and should matter to other people in the case, mostly in the case where people generally rely on that. And if people
Yeah, yeah.
don't care about it, then it's like, why should I care either?
Right. Well, and you can't always draw that correspondence. So
Hmm.
when Trump says he's going to build the biggest wall, right? It's just so
Yeah,
funny.
yeah, yeah.
It's so funny, right? And you want his word to be implemented. We'll say in your vision of what that means. This is the individualism
Mm.
creeping in. Then you're going to
Hmm.
be mightily disappointed, right? But the purpose of somebody that much higher up than you are, sorry, just manifestly true, right? Observably correct, uh, is that they're talking to a wide audience. And so they can't
Hmm.
use specifics like we're going to use 472 bricks. We're going to
Yep,
use, 18 miles of chain link. Like that
yep,
doesn't make any sense, right? And it wouldn't mean anything to me because I'm not in Texas or California, wherever the hell they're putting this wall up. Like
yep,
I'm not there. And so even if you said that, it wouldn't help because I don't know how big is the gap in the border. I have no
yep,
idea. Right.
yep,
And
yep,
so
yep.
you have to find that line, and the line for an audience is going to be more abstract because more people, in order to talk about or to more people, you need more abstract language. That's what abstraction is for, right? If you're having a personal conversation with somebody, abstraction is not helpful. You are
Mm.
wasting time. This is word
Hmm.
salad automatically, even if the words are quote correct or whatever. It's not relevant. This is the flood of literacy
Hmm.
again in the previous live stream. And so that's one of the problems is that our overkill is propositions. We're in the propositional tyranny. Our overkill is literacy. Way too much literacy, way too little comprehension. Way too little.
Hmm.
And so people are reinventing comprehension left, right, and center.
Hmm. Well, there's one thing I wanted to add. Sorry, just to go back a bit to the integrity with a man's word and that being important, is that people used to go to quite ridiculous lengths to actually conserve that
Yep.
integrity, even if. So let's say you're at a party and you're a little tipsy or something, and somebody asks if you'll do something, and you without thinking say yes, and then a second later you realize that it wasn't a good idea. Well, now you still got to do it. Actually, you can't go back on your word.
Right.
Honoring a bad contract, bad in the sense that it's kind of inefficient materially speaking, or it's
Or unfair.
unfair or unfavorable to you, and you only realize it halfway through the duration or something. Honoring that contract is a way of upholding your word and upholding your integrity, and
Right.
it's a clear signal that you will do what you have signed. So, for
Right.
example, uh, paying off a student loan that you signed off on, even though there's some way you could, I don't know, scam it or something.
You were scammed.
Like that's a
No, if you
no, no,
get a
no.
student
I
loan in the
wasn't.
United States, you were scammed. That
Okay, okay.
happened for sure. 100%. But you still have to pay it off. Right. And so
Yeah.
I want to tie this into my favorite topic. Thank you, Gustavs, which is the intimacy crisis.
Mm.
So in an individualistic frame, if something's been done unfairly to you, because it's the individualistic frame, you're at the center, very sneaky, right? You need to, like, somebody needs to fix that, right? In the integrity frame, you're part of this web,
Mm-hmm.
and that web is more important than you, because there's no such thing as an individual. That just doesn't. It's a stupid idea, right? It's completely wrong. And so, because you're a person connected to other persons, connected to nature, and connected to yourself, in order for anybody to know you, to know yourself, to have an actual identity, because identity is always in relation to that person. The quality of that's integrity. Integrity is a quality of relationship, right? That's intimacy crisis right there. The quality of that relies on the correspondence of your words and your actions. And so honoring your words is important. And again, we get into trouble when we try to make Donald Trump honor his words to us as citizens, because we're too far away. Like, I just want him to build a freaking wall. Like, I don't care if it's the highest wall ever and the best wall that ever could exist in the history of the universe. But I also want him to speak like that, please, because it gives me great joy in hearing that. I mean, I use hyperbole all the time, so I'm like a big
Yep.
fan of hyperbole
Yep.
or overkill in this. Yeah, if you want overkill, just pay attention to Donald Trump for like 20 minutes, right, in a speech or something. You'll get plenty of overkill, especially in the language, right? And then, of course, in the propositional tyranny, with all these individuals running around, they go, well, look, he didn't do it exactly according to the words he used. Right. But he got it all done. Like, he did the essence of the thing. And now there's nothing you can do, because you were so busy worrying about his words being imprecise and inaccurate that freed him up, because you're not out protesting, to go do the thing, which is what matters. It matters. Your actions matter, not your words. I don't say. I'm perfectly happy to just sit down and have a silent meal. Like, that's fine. That's far more enriching for me than you're coming on these live streams and hashing these things out. I mean, this is enriching because I think it does something important for the audience, which is why I put my time, energy, and attention to it. So, like, subscribe, donate. I've got to buy me a coffee thing, shop at my store, right? But, like, it's still not the essence. I mean, when we finally meet up in October in Ireland, that's going to give a depth to the relationship, right? Add a level of quality to the relationship that's going to change the nature, not only of these conversations, but the nature of all the talking that we've done in the past. Like, the past will change, right? As well as going forward, there'll be a stronger base to build this on. So I'm very much looking forward to Ireland, which again, any donations are good, because then I can enjoy Ireland better. So see if we even make it to October at this rate. Trees falling, or meteorites hitting the earth. It's buffalo boiling themselves in the hot springs. It's in interesting times.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of, like, intimacy and things like that sort of being generated by, well, not generated by, but being facilitated by being in a shared space and a shared kind of story context,
Frame.
and also that frame, and that having a mm, well, that's kind of, that happens when you have a clean space that has a boundary around it, right?
Right. Right. Well, and this sort of brings up for me, this is why fairy tales are full of overkill,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it's a dark forest, right? The witch builds a house out of candy. The kids are wandering alone in the forest. Like, what kind of world is this, right? And then they eat the candy, what? The wolf is dressed as the grandmother. Like, all this. It's all overkill in storytelling. And I think that's one of the things that Jordan Peterson rather brilliantly got at when he was talking about Pinocchio, right? He was pointing out this story is just full of overkill, left, right, and center. And yet you understand it. And it has a bigger impact on you because of the overkill. Because you could tell
Mm-hmm.
that same sort of a tale, not as a wooden boy, not with foxes, not with an island. Like you could, right? Because that story's been told, right? But it's the overkill of Pinocchio that gives it the entertainment value and makes it more popular. And, unfortunately, in a world where you don't have, we'll say, the highest things, virtues, and values that you're centered around or that you're able to gather around, right? Roughly speaking, that's the recession of the church or the loss of religion. The next most common thing you have as a large set, we'll say all of humanity or something, is entertainment. And that is why entertainment, those people are stars and they're millionaires and everything else. They didn't used to be. It used to be like a lot of people don't realize this. In Hollywood, in like the 30s and the 40s and stuff, wealthy people went there as their hobby. You didn't go there to get wealthy. You were already wealthy and you went there. No, obviously there's always hangers on, right? There's always people who want to hit it big or want to be on the screen and then they get noticed and right. But for the most part, all the people in Hollywood were wealthy. And that was what they were doing. That was just their hobby, was to provide this, movie or whatever to the people. And so it's a very different attitude, right? And that's why you watch a movie like The Producers, which is a great hysterical movie, right? And you realize, the reason why wealthy people were putting on plays, we'll say for the commoners, or even just for other wealthy people, is because it was a tax shelter. That is correct. That is the actual reason, right? And so it's not the only reason, right? But that was their thinking on it. Like we think about it differently because we see the play. They think about it differently because they plan the play. What's motivating that? Well, a lot of cases it was just I've got all this extra money, this windfall from this investment or whatever, and now I got to put it towards something. And wouldn't it be cool if all my friends thought I was cool because I was putting on a play? That's actually what motivates people at that layer of the hierarchy. Now you're not at that layer of the hierarchy, so you don't see that. I understand that, but also that's how it works. So it's sort of important to know. And that's why I said you got to be careful with hypocrisy, because a lot of things seem like hypocrisy and actually aren't. Right? It's very hard to determine. Sally Joe, wealthy people putting themselves on display for the masses as actors is a weird disruption of dignified behavior. Not really, Sally. They didn't always do that. Howard Hughes did that. But usually they would fund the movie. And they would make Humphrey Bogart famous. Right. And then he was the exemplar for certain types of behavior, as was Edward G. Robinson and some of these famous actors from back then. Right. They became the exemplars, not the wealthy people. Except for there are some exceptions, like Howard Hughes is narcissistic.
Well, there's a big kind of overlap in some ways between like sending out a strong signal and putting on a show. Like public hangings. Are they a show? Are they,
right?
What is that?
Exactly. Well, and putting on a show is sending out some number of signals. A play show, reality TV. Well, yeah, we weren't talking about reality TV. So of course it's different because it has a different name. This isn't that hard. It doesn't have to be hard. And yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that the age of reality TV was the sign that the TV era was an error. that I can make that case in 2 seconds, right? Reality TV was the death of MTV. Solved it, right? That's proof positive that all the goodness had left TV in the moment of Real World. I was there. I remember it well. I watched the whole first season of Real World. It was horrific. And you couldn't take your eyes off it either. It's like watching a train wreck. Yeah. And then you find out later, right, how bad it was behind the scenes and how curated it really was and how not real world actually was, right? You find all that stuff out. And then what is that? That's the materialization of the commodification of TV, because reality TV is very cheap to make, right? And so it's higher profit. And so they're no longer doing it for the same reasons. The people who were even MTV, like, you think MTV was people making money off your video entertainment. No, MTV was a manipulation of the radio system to get unknown bands known. That's what MTV was. Now, the side effect was, the way to do that was to create a music video channel, right? And then once you create one, they become like everybody wants one. And so do I have this right? If my memory is not betraying me, and it might be because it does occasionally, because it's a treacherous bastard. V66 was a competitor to MTV, but it was like regional. I think it was in Boston even. I think it was like a local to where I lived. And then because they were mimicking a bigger pattern, they're like, well, we have a few extra $100 million and we have a TV station. Why don't we just do what MTV is doing? Now the problem is, much like with the streaming services, see my other channel, which is just my name, where I talk about this. Unlike the streaming, just like the streaming services, the first person that does it has, will say, a final cause in mind, right? They have a reason for doing it. But the people copying it have a different reason. Like, they just want to be cool, right? Or they think, oh, they're doing that to make money. No, they weren't doing that to make money. MTV was not to make money. And it might have made money. That's a different issue, although it didn't, which is why they went to reality TV, right? But they wanted to manipulate radio play. They wanted to give unknown bands a place to be heard. Now, that pattern is the same pattern as MySpace, and why MySpace didn't become Facebook. Because Tom cared about music and bands and did not care about social media, even though he created the first, largest, and most popular social media network of its time, right? It was way larger than anything else. But that was for music. And when he was offered the opportunity to become Facebook, which definitely happened, by the way, he said, no, I want this to be about music. And so, like, things don't work the way you think, right? Because you don't understand other people's motivations. In the case of streaming, Netflix does something very specific, technically, from a technical standpoint. And they're probably the only ones that can get away with it because they were just there first, and there's not enough. Like, you just can't replicate things indefinitely. And so no one's going to be able to compete with them ever, because their costs are much lower, right? And no one can get the cost that low because of a technical thing that they've done and partnership agreements that they've made. And so all these competing streaming services, one of the Disney guys apparently just recently said, like, streaming is over. Yeah, streaming is over because you cannot make money with that model unless you're Netflix, right? And so you have to understand all that, and you don't, right? I barely understand it, and I only tripped across the information because tech is my thing, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have known, right? I wouldn't have no idea, because I have no insight into how these businesses operate and how they're making money. And business models vary in the same industry all the time. And so some businesses go out of business because their business model is terrible, not because their product isn't the best product ever, right? And people don't understand that. And then they attribute it to, like, the imaginary psychic space dragon of capitalism, or, they blame some philosophical movement for why the thing they thought, like, Betamax failed because, the other companies muscled them. No, it didn't. Like, that's not what happened. Right. And sometimes things fail because an incompetent person is put in charge. And so you have a better technology because the guy who developed it was really smart. The guy running the company is a moron. Like, that happened a lot with Commodore and back in the day. Right. So you get the Commodore Amiga, which is clearly the best computer ever made. And total failure because the subsequent systems, the management team asked for stupid things and bad ideas about how the market worked. And if you want a fascinating story, look at the difference between how the Brits were advertising the Commodore and what bundles they put together, even Commodore 64, Amiga, the whole 9 yards, and how the American marketing teams failed at it miserably every time. And it's hysterical because there's so much contrast there. And, like, the Brits will say, like, oh yeah, I walked into his office, I told them, do we need to do this and this? And they totally ignored me. And I just walked out because I knew it was going to fail. And sure enough, it did. Like, this is a very common story back from the 80s and 90s. especially because there's a huge difference between the European understanding of things and the American understanding of things, right? There's a huge gap in vision.
Yeah.
And when you get to things of scale of a culture or multiple cultures, in the case of the United States, the Europeans have a much better handle on that because they've always had that. And the United States is new and really doesn't know what it's doing with respect to those things. And not to say, some salespeople have made great inroads or some market people have made great inroads, but basically, you want a European marketing firm, preferably one from England if you're in the United States, because they speak English, they understand they understand the English thought a little bit better. Just a little tip in case you own a business and that's what you want to do. I've never owned a business of that scale. Still good advice though. So yeah, it's very hard to understand from down below what's going on higher up, above you, we'll say.
Yep. Yeah, and you've gotta accept that, and that's hierarchy. And sometimes you need to be put in your place, like all this
Yeah.
with these signals. And so like I was just thinking like what's a good example of something like Overkill, but I think was perfectly fine, was the story of Romulus and Remus. Like he got put in his place. The guy got put in his place, and the order was created out of that. And that's where Rome came from.
That's a really good that's a really good observation. Let me just give me 1 second. So everybody talks about wanting to solve domicide, but no one wants to be put in their place. This is going to be a tweet. If you're not signed up to my Twitter account, maybe you should. So yeah, I think everybody talks about domicide.
It's the best Twitter.
And nobody wants to be put like in their place. And so it's like, well, that's your fault. Right. That's not somebody else.
Yeah, I think I'm looking for someone who's gonna put me in my place. At some level. Like that's where people are, I think, and I'm not special in that way. It's just it's a lot of acting out, and so on. Well, that's other people, obviously, not me. Kind of acting out and making trouble and challenging authorities and all that stuff.
Well, that came up today on my Twitter feed. Apparently, there's this woman in this. Yeah. There's this woman in this yoga. It's a little video. This woman in this yoga, like I forget what it was, like pelvic yoga or something class, and she's writhing in this and screaming, doing this primal and crying to release her, inner pent up whatever. And it's like, well, there you go. Also overkill, also wrong in every bad overkill, right? And I was just like, man. And then you bring it up, like that was, I saw that maybe an hour before we started our talk, and then it comes up, and I'm like, well, there you go. There's the overkill, and yeah, we need to be put in our place so that that's how we avoid domicide. But we've got to be able to accept being put in a place. Like there's a trade-off there. The trade-off is your infinite freedom, which is an illusion anyway. So it's good to get rid of illusions. So that's a pretty good deal. But your other trade-off is that there's things you won't be able to do. Like look, I could sell the car and buy a boat, right? But then I can't drive around in my car. Like it's that, like there's trade-offs everywhere. Like, I could have pursued being a software engineer, and I chose no, because I learned the software thing. I can still code. It's fine. I'm pretty decent coder, above average, right? But no, I chose to go with the systems engineering and the DevOps stuff, and I made a hell of a lot of money doing it. So I regret nothing, right? And so there's all these trade-offs that you have to make, and so you should just be aware of what they are. And overkill helps to highlight like what can happen, right? What can happen when you don't make trade-offs, and yeah, everybody complains about domicide. Nobody wants to be put in their place. So what do you think, Gustavs? Are you feeling pretty okay, or you want to wrap it up, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to wrap it up. I'm happy to wrap it up. If there's one thing I'd like to say, it's that I think people putting stuff in the frame of overkill which we kind of did a little bit for the sake of, I think, demonstration, but it's the materialist frame. People putting things in that frame, it's kind of like bean counting. It's being a bit of a Scrooge. It's uh it's it's
Yeah.
being tight-fisted, and I think those people severely don't see and underestimate just how good things can be if we're more generous with our time, energy, and attention, and if we
Right.
are more deliberate and more focused about it.
Mm.
Because that's how we got where we are, and by being more tight-fisted, things aren't getting any better. Actually, we aren't getting more stuff, or if we are, it's the wrong kind of stuff.
I like that. Yeah. 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 I mean, I think to wrap it up, yeah. The things you judge as overkill may not be overkill. The things that will say can reasonably will say be labeled as overkill might be required. Therefore, the fact that they're overkill is not an indictment of them in any way, shape, or form. And it's very hard for you to determine what's overkill. And some people will use overkill to make a point that's a bad point, right? Or to set a boundary that's a bad boundary. And if you can sort of understand all that, it helps you to orient yourself in the world. Again, the topic of last night's live stream. If you haven't checked it out, you probably should. And we need that. Like that's not it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And so your job is to use discernment and learn how to react and respond to it because it's there in the world. It's in reality. It's part of reality. So that's the important part. So Gustavs, thank you so much for bringing this up and taking the time to explore this topic with me. I always get a lot out of these conversations, so I appreciate your perspective and the care that you take with these subjects. I mean, nobody watching this will understand that we regularly have these conversations about, hey, did you want to do another video? And then it takes a few weeks of rumination on Gustav's part to even agree. And he's often like, oh yeah, no, I have this topic, but I don't think I'm ready. It's going to take a couple weeks. It's like, oh, okay. Like a lot of work goes into pretty much everything on my channel. On my personal channel, that's not necessarily true. That's more recounting old work from my tech days. But on this channel in particular, a lot of effort goes into this, a lot of work. There's a lot of people behind the scenes that you don't see. So you shouldn't judge it as overkill. Listen, everybody, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for taking the time, and keep a few things in mind. Everybody wants to make the world a better place. I get that, but the world needs you to be better, right? And that's the key. The world needs you to be better. And if you're better, that will make the world better. You don't need to solve the Iran conflict with Israel or anything exciting. You can just like improve your life, smile at a cashier at the store, and that'll do it. Thanks for joining, everybody. I appreciate it. Have a great